My name is Tim Butler. I'm Director of Services with responsibility for infrastructure and the city, Kilkenny City as well. The funding that was mentioned by Deputy Noonan or Minister Noonan is most welcome. I suppose it'll allow us to give an additional focus on mobility and revitalising our town, our city centre, and our different towns and villages throughout the county. So it's most welcome. I'd encourage you all as well. Our draft development plan is currently on public display. So those of you with an interest in development and how Kilkenny City and the county is going to develop, I'd encourage you to partake in that, to make submissions if needs be, and we'd welcome any submissions that are made by anybody. Just about what this is going to cover is just to really show the various the current projects that are ongoing within the city centre at the moment. With a focus on works that we're currently undertaking and ones that we have funding and will be doing in the future. Projects to which we have funding applications in, and we will obviously have an increased focus on mobility and active travel, and that is a major theme in our county and city development plan this year. It's mainly visual, so it's pictures, and if you want to ask questions at the end, that's no difficulty. And all these, I suppose, it's mobility and active travel, but it's about placemaking as well, and making the city centre as comfortable as we can for pedestrians, for people to come in and enjoy, and to try and revitalise our city centre. And a lot of the projects we undertook during the COVID over the last year have complemented this. So just on the current projects, we're currently we have a small little bit of work to do on Parliament Street, which is in the enhanced footpaths and the pedestrian area, and the resurfaced Parliament Street itself. We just have to finish off a little bit of work at the Market Cross car park. Vicar Street, which is pictured here, has been, I suppose, underdeveloped over the last 30 years. It's probably the poorest footpaths in the city. They're narrow, they're uneven, and they certainly need a lot of work. Our proposal, and we have planning in place and funding in place for it, is to make it one way coming into the city, having counterflow cycling, so you'll be able to cycle both ways comfortably in and out. And they'll be segregated, and you will also have wider footpaths. In places, the footpaths here are about 1.2 metres wide, whereas the recommended is a minimum of 1.8. We also have Part 8 and secured most of the funding to permanently put the one-way system into Ormond Street and to revitalise that area as well, and to upgrade and make it more comfortable for pedestrians and cyclists. We have plans as well, and we have a consultant being appointed over in the next 2 weeks for the upgrade of Kieran Street, St Mary's Lane, and to make the outdoor seated area in the Market Yard a permanent feature. So that was where we removed 23 car parking spaces in the Market Yard and replaced that with a seated area. So we'll be looking to permanently put that in place with a suitable cover that will allow people to sit out for all the year. And it's great to see that even in the cold weather, people are sitting down there and using it, and it's been a fantastic addition to the city centre. We'll also, I suppose, and we are appointing consultants to look at the Link, Butler Gallery and the Carnegie Plaza. We're looking at cycling routes, and we've in and out of the city. We pride ourselves as being a 10-minute city that you can get into the city pretty easily from any of the outskirts, any of the estates on the outskirts of the city itself, in 10 minutes. So we're trying to improve the cycling facilities from each of the different north, south, east and west of the city centre, and to provide dedicated cycle routes in off-road as much as we can. And obviously we're delighted with our partnership with WIT and with the appointment of Katrina as cycling officer, and I think it'll be a huge addition to the council's work. All these, I suppose, we have funding for these, but we do have to provide some match funding, usually in the region of about 25% for these funding as well. So the next slide then just shows you Parliament Street, the improvements that have been carried out here on Parliament Street. And as I say, we're just finishing works at the Market Cross car park, the entrance into there. And the next slide then will just show you. This is, I suppose, two projects that are with they'll be completed this year. Is the first one here on the left hand side is to demarcate I suppose the 30 kilometre an hour zones as you're coming into the city centre itself. So we won't be putting signposts in there. We'll be changing the surface and putting up some kind of a marker there to indicate to people that they're now coming into to cars in particular, a 30 kilometre an hour zone, and it's a shared surface that's shared by both cyclists and pedestrians and cars. So it's a natural warning to people to slow down, and it does work. And I suppose it helps to keep cars out of the area as well if they don't need to go in there. So that's something, that work will be carried out during this year. And on the right hand side then is just an example of our off-road or off-street connectivity from the eastern environs or the New Park area. So this will link from the Lintown Hall, O'Loughlin's, that New Park area, down through Ballybuck Street, which will be we'll be looking to get segregated cycle track down along there, through Wolftown Street car park, down through the lanes onto Michael Street, and ending up there at Lady Desert Bridge. So as much as possible, it'll be off-road or at a minimum with segregated cycling areas. So on the next slide then is just an indication of some of the COVID measures that we implemented to help with the public health pandemic that was around. And I suppose the biggest emphasis for us was to make sure that as people came out into the streets and into the streets of Kilkenny when shops reopened, and that in June and also later in the year, that there was adequate space for pedestrians and for people to move around comfortably. So we implemented a one-way system on Rosin Street and High Street, and two-way on Bateman Quay. And this has been largely successful. There was a number of implementations we had to do to, I suppose, improve matters, like making the traffic light smarter. In other words, if there's no cars at a certain traffic light on Patrick Street or Rosin Street, they'll stay red and they'll give priority to where there are a number of cars coming. So that's one of the ways we improved, I suppose, the flow of traffic, but also facilitated, I suppose, wider pedestrian areas on High Street and Rosin Street in particular. We also pedestrianised James Street from 10 in the morning until 9 in the evening, and we extended the pedestrianisation of Kieran Street as well. We had farmers market at weekends on the parade. We had artists on the Mayor's Walk, additional pedestrianisation, as I say, in Kieran Street and James Street, the outdoor seated area in the market yard, and we changed the parking, some of the parking areas on the Castle Road, which was bus parking only. We changed it to car and bus. And that's to encourage people not to come right into town if at all possible. And also on Wolftown Street, we made it an hourly car park to encourage a turnover of customers into John Street. So they were the COVID measures. A lot of them proved very successful, and we'll be looking, I suppose, to extend them into the future. So on the next slide then. Currently within the city core, we're looking at, I suppose, the current work that we've done is obviously on the pedestrianisation, the farmers markets, the seated area, and changes to the car parking facilities. So for the future, we're going to look at the city centre traffic management plan, and there'll be an increased focus on pedestrians, cyclists, and public transport. That's the way that every town or every town, city and town of our size is going to be moving into the future. And I suppose what we are doing at the moment as part of the development plan is we're preparing a transport plan for the city itself, which will examine connectivity north and south of the city centre. And also, I suppose, within the city centre itself, we will be putting in place a traffic model that will indicate what way the one-way system could work if we permanently put it in place, and what streets should and shouldn't be included in that. So that'll all be I suppose we will have a lot of learning from the traffic model. Once the transport plan is done, we'll be putting a traffic model in place, and we'll be coming up with a design for how traffic will move in the city centre in the future. So if we move on to the next one then. Future projects then is, I suppose, on connectivity, and on the right hand side you'll see a cartoon drawing, I suppose, of Greens Bridge, if you could say it. So what we will be trying to do is link Greens Bridge and the linear park, so connect down from the Riverside Park, which has been done in the Abbey Quarter or the brewery site at the moment, to connect under the dry arch in Greens Bridge and down along and connect down to the Riverside Park, Riverside Drive, which will be a natural off-road connection from the Sycamores, Talbot's Inch, Talbot's Gate and Riverside Drive right into the city centre. To look at additional cycling and pedestrian bridges, and this is all contained in our draft development plan, which is on public display at the moment. So cycling and pedestrian bridges, additional ones north and south of the centre. So between John's Bridge and the Ossory Bridge, connecting over onto the St. Canice's or the HSE site on the Dublin Road, and similarly then down at Riverside Drive, on the northern end of the city across to the Bleach Road and that area. So that will make it safer for people to come down onto the Riverside Drive and Riverside Walk and cycle straight into town. We're looking also at school safety zones, and just the picture on the right, and I think I put it a second time on the next slide as well, apologies for that, but that just gives an indication of the temporary work that Katrina and Ian Gardner, our city engineer, were very heavily involved in putting in temporary measures to encourage people to walk and cycle into work and to eliminate cars. The biggest thing that you need to do to make schools safe is to eliminate cars from pulling in indiscriminately in front of the schools themselves. I think this has been largely successful. And I suppose we will be looking to make these and others more permanent in the future. To put in cycle support infrastructure, so that's bike racks. I mean, we have about 300 facilities throughout the city for cycling, for parking your bike. But some of these would need to be made more long-term, and I suppose we need to put in some that are covered and encourage, I suppose, business on the outskirts of the town to facilitate bikes as well for people who want to come into the city centre during lunch breaks or in the evening time, that they're not jumping into their cars the whole time. And to replicate the new park to the city centre connectivity, to replicate that from Lochbuy, from the western environs and from the Loch McCask or the northern side of Kilkenny City as well, and to increase pedestrianisation and improve the public realm within the whole city itself. So, okay, move on to the next slide. Again, the picture on the left is one that you saw already, and on the right there is some of the some of our cycling manuals, the type of crossings and the type of that you would have at school. So that's what we will be aiming for, and we'll be looking at implementing those at all our schools throughout the city and the county. Okay. The other part is, I suppose, we're lucky enough that we got in with our city bus service. We have two routes within the Kilkenny City itself, the green and the red route, which connect from we'll say from the Castlecombe Road to Lochbuy, and from the Dublin Road to St. Luke's Hospital. So both of those are running up and running at the moment. We're unfortunate, I suppose, that COVID came in at roughly the same time, which did impact on the usage. But we would look at it that we will be looking to expand that into the future, to bring in more areas that are served by the city bus service. We're conscious that this is not a short-term measure. It's not going to be an overnight success. And I suppose if you're familiar with Waterford, when we saw the city bus service down there initially, there was never too many on it. But I think now you'll never see a bus that's less than half full. So that's to be encouraged. So we will be looking at expanding this with the NTA into the future. And the other thing we're doing as well is that we have, I suppose, the Brega Valley on the outskirts, on the western side of Kilkenny City, which is the next area for development of housing. So over the next 10 years, there'll be 3,000 houses developed in this area, which will serve to accommodate anybody who's going to come and work and live and enjoy, I suppose, Kilkenny life, particularly with the development that's going on down in the Brewery Quarter at the moment. So I suppose we're doing enabling infrastructure on that at the moment. The road and water and ESB and gas connections are all going in there at the moment. They've been slightly delayed with COVID, and it's now expected that it'll be late in Q2 before that infrastructure is completed. But what we will be doing there as well is we'll be trying to link that in along the Brega Valley so that you can cycle or walk into town off-road in the future. And a lot of the development in this area will be well supported by cycling infrastructure. The road that's being put in, or the street that's been put in at the moment, will have segregated cycling and pedestrian areas, which is great when we're developing a new site like this. It's not as easy to do that in the city centre where you're confined by buildings and narrow streets. So we have to come up with other creative ways, I suppose, of encouraging cycling and walking in those areas. So going on to, I think it's the last slide, and it's just to make you're all aware of, I suppose, the Abbey Quarter, and there's a huge focus in the Abbey Quarter for walking and cycling. It is going to be, as much as possible, traffic free with limited parking down there in the future. It'll be bordered on the north side by a Riverside Park, and as I say, our intention is that will connect down onto Riverside Drive, down through Green's Bridge, and there will also be a substantial green or park in front of St. Francis Abbey Brewery, or St. Francis Abbey at the moment. The brew house was due for completion early this year, but that's now back, I suppose, again with COVID, but we're hopeful that will be completed in Q3 2021. So that's it really. And the last one is just a picture of, I suppose, with more people walking and cycling, we will need better lighting. I suppose the old yellow lights on the right hand side of the drawing here, you can see the improvements that you can make with the new LED lighting. So Kilkenny has about 5,000 over 10,000 lights have been changed to the LED lighting, so that makes it safer for cycling and walking, for pedestrians and for all road users really. So but the overriding focus of the public lighting replacement project is for energy efficiency, but it has a huge added benefits for road safety from a cycling and from a walking point of view as well.